Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Brad Morrison was 42 years old and had a routine many envied. Every morning he woke up at 6, made coffee, checked his work emails while the sun rose over the quiet Nashville, Tennessee suburb. Married to Vanessa for 15 years, he'd built a solid life, a 3-bedroom house with a spacious backyard, 2 cars in the garage, annual trips to Florida, and a bank account that allowed for comfort without extravagance. Brad was a project manager at a mid-sized construction company, the kind of man who solved problems, met deadlines, and came home on time. Vanessa was a Pilates instructor, with a slender figure and an energy that impressed her friends. They had 2 kids, 13-year-old Sophie and 10-year-old Dylan. Life, for Brad, seemed to work. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. Solid. Real. Vanessa had always been a bit critical. From the start of their marriage, she'd made comments about ambition, about not settling in life, about how some couples seemed more adventurous. Brad took it as just part of her personality, restless, full of energy. He'd laugh it off, change the subject, and move on. After all, 15 years of marriage didn't pass without ups and downs. But in recent months, her remarks had grown sharper. She mentioned wealthy clients from her studio, husbands who took their wives to fancy dinners and exotic vacations. Brad listened but didn't think much of it. He believed he was giving them a decent, stable, secure life, and to him, that was enough. Everything changed on a Saturday in July. Brad organized the annual barbecue that had become a tradition, friends, neighbors, some of Vanessa's co-workers. The backyard was full, the sun shone brightly, the beer was cold, and the mood was celebratory. Brad was at the grill, flipping steaks and chatting with Jim, a neighbor who always brought the best jokes. Vanessa was on the other side of the yard, surrounded by a group of friends, a glass of rose in hand, laughing loudly. Brad glanced over at her and smiled. She looked beautiful in that light white dress, her hair pulled into a bun. For a moment, he felt lucky. That's when she said it. "Sometimes I think I deserved something better in life, you know?" Her voice cut through the hum of conversation. Brad froze, spatula still in hand. The group around Vanessa fell into an awkward silence. She laughed it off right away, as if it were a harmless joke, but no one laughed with her. Jim coughed and quickly changed the subject. Brad forced a smile, turned the meat, and carried on as if nothing had happened. But something inside him broke at that exact moment. The phrase echoed in his head for the rest of the afternoon like a persistent buzz. Deserved something better. Better than what? Better than him? Better than the life he'd built for them? Brad couldn't eat during the barbecue. He couldn't look at Vanessa without feeling something strange in his chest. When everyone had left and he was picking up empty cups in the yard, she came over, put a hand on his shoulder, and casually said, "It was a great day, wasn't it?" Brad looked at her and just nodded. Vanessa didn't notice, or pretended not to notice, the ice in his eyes. In the days that followed, Brad couldn't let it go. The phrase kept looping in his mind, especially at night when he lay beside her and she scrolled through her phone, smiling at the screen. Brad started noticing things he'd previously overlooked. Vanessa left early for private sessions, but came home far too late. Her phone, once left carelessly around the house, was now always with her, screen face down. She'd get messages and delete them quickly. Whenever Brad walked into the room while she was on the phone, Vanessa would hang up in a hurry, saying it was just a student confirming a time. Brad wasn't the suspicious type. He never had been. But now, every little detail seemed like a flashing red warning sign. The following Wednesday, Brad woke up with a certainty that ached in his chest. He needed to know. He couldn't stand living in doubt, in that suspended state where everything seemed normal but nothing made sense. At breakfast, Vanessa said she had a private session at 10 with Kelly, a longtime client. She kissed Brad on the cheek, grabbed her bag, and left. Brad waited 5 minutes, picked up his phone, and called Kelly. He'd met her at a studio party months earlier and still had her number saved. The conversation was brief. "Hi Kelly, it's Brad, Vanessa's husband. Sorry to bother you, but she left some material here that you'll need for today's session. Should I bring it over?" "Session? Today?" Kelly sounded confused. "No, Brad, I cancelled my sessions with Vanessa about 3 weeks ago. I'm traveling." Brad thanked her, hung up, and felt the floor drop out from under him. He didn't hesitate. He went to the computer, opened the shared location account they'd set up years ago for family safety, and saw the blue dot marking Vanessa's location, right at a hotel he knew well, 20 minutes away near downtown Nashville. Brad grabbed his car keys and left without a second thought. The drive to the hotel felt endless and yet far too short. Brad's heart pounded hard, his palms sweaty on the wheel. Part of him hoped he was wrong, that there'd be a logical explanation. But the other part, the part that already knew the truth, just wanted to see it with his own eyes. He parked in front of the hotel, a modern building with a glass facade. He walked into the lobby, approached the front desk, and with a calmness he didn't know he possessed, told the clerk he needed to speak with his wife. It was a family emergency. He gave Vanessa's name. The young clerk, looking eager to help, hesitated for a moment, but Brad insisted. "Please, it's urgent. She's not answering her phone." The young man checked the system and, perhaps out of sympathy or naivety, gave him the room number. Brad thanked him and went upstairs. The third-floor hallway was quiet, carpeted, lit with soft lighting that gave everything a surreal tone. Brad stopped in front of room 312. He took a deep breath, raised his hand, and knocked 3 times, firmly. He heard voices inside, a muffled laugh, then hurried footsteps. The door opened, and there stood Vanessa in a white hotel robe, hair down, eyes wide when she saw who it was. Behind her, sitting on the still unmade bed, was Greg. Brad knew Greg. Everyone knew Greg. He was the personal trainer Vanessa constantly mentioned, always with exaggerated admiration. "Greg is amazing, he has this revolutionary technique, Greg this, Greg that." Brad used to joke about it before. Now, looking at that man sitting there in a tank top and sweatpants, everything made sense in a way that hurt. "Brad," Vanessa's voice trembled, barely audible. Greg stood up from the bed, clearly uncomfortable, trying to find something to say. Brad didn't yell. He didn't lunge forward. He just stood there, calm in a way that even frightened himself. The silence in the room was thick, heavy as lead. "So this is what you deserved that was better?" Brad said, looking straight at Vanessa. His voice was low and controlled but filled with a pain that cut through the air. "A guy who's probably seeing 3 other women at the same time?" Greg took a step forward, raising his hands defensively. "Man, look, this isn't what." "Shut up." Brad cut him off without taking his eyes off Vanessa. "You don't matter here." "Not at all." Greg stepped back, bit his lip, and stayed quiet. Vanessa started crying. "Brad, I don't know what happened. I was confused. It was a mistake, I swear." "A mistake?" Brad interrupted, and now there was something sharp in his voice. "You were confused? How many times, Vanessa? How many times did you come here, lie to me, lie to our kids?" She sobbed harder, covering her face with her hands. "I didn't want to hurt you. I don't know. I felt lost." "You were right at that barbecue," Brad said slowly, each word carrying weight. "You did deserve something better. And so did I." He took a step back, glanced once at Greg, who was hunched near the window, then at Vanessa, crying uncontrollably. "You can keep him. You can keep all of this. I'm leaving." Brad walked out of the room, closed the door gently, and headed down the hallway. Only when he reached the elevator, alone, did his legs start to shake. He leaned against the cold metal wall and took a deep breath, trying to process what had just happened. But there was no time to fall apart. Not now. He needed to act. Brad went straight from the hotel to the office of a lawyer a friend had recommended months earlier during a casual conversation about messy divorces. Back then, Brad had thought it was funny. Now, he sat in a corporate office, telling his story while the lawyer took notes. He filed for divorce that same afternoon, requesting division of assets, custody of the children, and laid everything out objectively, without drama. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, looked at Brad and said, "You're being rational." "That's rare." Brad simply replied, "I don't have a choice." Vanessa tried calling him that night. 17 times. Brad didn't answer any of them. The next day, she showed up at the house while he was gently explaining to the kids that Mom and Dad would be living apart for a while. Sophie, the older one, asked if it was her fault. Dylan just hugged his dad and cried. Brad held back his tears and told them no, none of this was their fault, that he and Vanessa still loved them both, but sometimes adults had to make hard decisions. When Vanessa arrived, Brad asked her to leave. Not now. Not in front of them. She left, but not before giving him a look of desperation he'd never seen before. Brad didn't make a public scene, but he didn't lie either. When friends asked what had happened, he told the truth simply and directly: she was having an affair. "I found out. We're getting divorced." Some were shocked, others uncomfortable, but everyone understood. News spread quickly, as it always does in suburban communities where everyone knows each other. Vanessa soon felt the weight of exposure. Some friends distanced themselves. Studio clients canceled sessions, uneasy about the situation. Married women, especially, no longer felt comfortable training with someone who'd so blatantly cheated on her husband. Within 3 weeks, Vanessa lost half her clientele. She tried to keep her composure, but the financial and emotional pressure was obvious. Greg, meanwhile, also faced consequences. He worked at a well-known local gym, but rumors about his involvement with a married client reached management. Some female clients complained about inappropriate conduct, saying they no longer felt safe. Concerned about its reputation, the gym fired Greg 2 weeks after the scandal broke. He tried apologizing to Vanessa, saying he hadn't expected things to blow up like this. Vanessa realized, too late, that Greg had never been interested in anything serious. He wanted fun, adventure, an ego boost. When things got complicated, he vanished. Brad, on the other hand, channeled all his energy into his kids and himself. He woke up early, made breakfast for Sophie and Dylan, drove them to school, went to work, came home, helped with homework, cooked dinner. On weekends, he took them to play basketball, ride bikes, watch movies. He realized he was more present than he'd ever been, even when the marriage had seemed fine. The pain of betrayal was still there, throbbing, but he refused to let it consume him. He went back to the gym, started running in the mornings, read books that had sat on his shelf for years. Slowly, Brad felt himself reconnecting with who he'd been before he became just Vanessa's husband. The divorce moved quickly. Vanessa tried negotiating shared custody, but Brad's lawyer presented evidence of her emotional and financial instability. When Sophie and Dylan were privately asked in court, they made it clear they wanted to stay with their father. The judge granted Brad primary custody, with regular visitation for Vanessa. The asset division was fair, but Vanessa ended up with less than she'd hoped. She had to sell her car and move back in with her mother in a small apartment on the other side of town. The Pilates studio where she worked cut her hours, and Vanessa started doing freelance work just to get by. Brad, meanwhile, got a promotion at work 4 months after the separation. His boss recognized his dedication and how he'd maintained professionalism even through personal crisis. The raise helped stabilize his life and the kids even further. 6 months after the discovery, Brad was invited to a company year-end celebration at a downtown hotel. He hesitated, but Sophie said, "Go, Dad. You deserve to get out a little." So he went. That's where he met Rachel. She was a communications manager at a partner company, with expressive brown eyes and a smile that seemed genuine. They started talking about work, then about movies, books, travel. The conversation flowed naturally, effortlessly. Rachel mentioned she was also divorced and understood what it was like to start over. For the first time in a long while, Brad felt there might be room for something new. He wasn't ready for anything serious, and he said so. Rachel smiled and replied, "Neither am I. But we can grab coffee and see where it goes." They exchanged numbers. 2 days later, Brad asked her out for coffee. Then another. And another. It wasn't love yet, but it was a beginning. Light, honest, without games. Vanessa, meanwhile, sank into regret. She tried reconnecting with the kids, but Sophie barely spoke to her, still hurt by her betrayal of their father. Dylan was kinder, but there was distance. Vanessa realized she'd lost not just her marriage, but her children's trust. She started therapy and tried rebuilding her life, but the weight of what she'd done followed her. The few friends who remained kept a certain reserve. Greg never showed up again. The comment she'd made at that barbecue, "Sometimes I think I deserved something better," haunted her every night. She'd had something better. She'd had a faithful husband, a stable family, children who loved her. And she'd thrown it all away for an empty fantasy. A year after the barbecue, Brad sat alone in the backyard, drinking a beer as the sun set. Sophie and Dylan were inside doing homework. Rachel had joined them for dinner the night before, and the kids liked her. It was early, Brad knew, but he felt things were falling into place. He thought briefly of Vanessa, not with anger, but with pity. Pity for someone who didn't appreciate what she had until she lost it all. Brad raised his beer bottle in a silent toast to fate, which had taken Vanessa's words as seriously as they deserved. He smiled, a small but genuine smile, and went inside. Because, something better, Brad finally understood, wasn't illusion or adventure. It was peace. And he'd finally found it. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.